Well, the scenes that you're seeing are certainly not unusual, particularly given the occasion that is being marked here, mourning taking place for AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini Kabheki Zulu. So tonight we're going to be in conversation with different guests who will be weighing in on the history, the culture, the heritage that we're seeing at play here. And of course, we've also spoken to powerful political leaders over the last couple of days who've gone to the Royal Palace to pay their respects and to pay tribute to the life of the King. In studio now, joining me will be the deputy editor of the Sunday Times, Mike Siluma. And in a moment, Mike, I want us to really talk about this moment and what it represents, because in many ways, we've heard people talking about how this is the only king of this generation, and therefore with him dies part of what he represented throughout his 70-plus years of life.
Yes, yes. I would not say the only king of his generation. I would say that
AmaZulu king.
Yes, for the last 50 years. You know, a lot of people who are adults today, you know, would only know this king, you know, as you know, in their life. I think that for me, this moment marks the closing of a chapter, a very eventful chapter in his life. King Zwelithini would have been witness to the political changes that have happened in South Africa. You know, he ascended at the height of apartheid, you know, in the early 70s, and then he would have witnessed all the way through the intensification of the struggle to end apartheid, and then he would have lived through the negotiations of Kodesa and the 1994 democratic dispensation, and in all of that, you will see that his own life would have reflected the ebbs and flows of the political power balance, you know, whether it's between himself and Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was the head of the KwaZulu Bantustan, as it were, who's also called the traditional prime minister. There were lots of tensions between them while Chief Buthelezi was the head of the Bantustan, and then there was the conflict, the political conflict, you know, in the 20 years between, you know, that led up to 1994. Yes, serious political conflict between the IFP and the ANC and other formations, even the Black Consciousness movement. And then you get to 1994 itself, and then you see him again, you know, whereas at some point he would have been very close to Chief Buthelezi, and at another point later on you see that he's starting now to assert himself, you know, as the king, you know, of the Zulu people.
In essence, it's a journey of evolution, one that is complex and one that is contested. Because one of the things that we have seen in the past week or so, since, you know, his passing was made public, is that a lot is being said about him. And some are saying, well, to what extent do we acknowledge people's lives in their truest sense? Or are we at a point where we are sanitizing history simply because there has been that evolution, that who the king was in 2021 is not who he would have been in 94, is not who he would have been in 1990, as you're saying, oftentimes perhaps flowing to the currents of the moment, the social moment, the political moment as well?
I think if you want to be purely political, then you would say there were two contending forces during his reign. It was the apartheid state and the forces that were fighting the apartheid state. And then you would reduce that completely to say, where did the king stand at all times in all of this period? But actually, life is never like that. You know, you will see, as we were saying earlier on, that his role would have changed with the changing power balance, in the country. But also, I think that to only look at his political positioning would not be telling the full story of King Zwelithini, because there's no one human being who's got one dimension. We all have many different dimensions. And if you look at his political stance, you'd also have to look at his cultural contribution, what he represented as a cultural icon, if I may call him that, to say in South Africa, in the South Africa of today, which is a diverse society, which is a multicultural society, what did he represent? And I would say that his presence, in part, was also a reflection of the new society that we've tried to construct, which is a traditional society living alongside a modern democratic state.
We'll talk about that marriage and how it is that, at least from the context of the royal house, the king went about trying to perfect that union between being committed to his culture, his heritage, but also recognizing that the times are moving, and how best does culture adapt, if that's the correct word to even use in that context.